Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're taking a fresh look at a story most of us think we know really well, the birth of Jesus.
Yeah, it's one of those foundational stories.
Exactly. And our main source here is this fascinating audio sermon from back in April 2016. It really digs into Luke's gospel, but also pulls in bits from Matthew and Acts. Our goal really is to unpack some of the common ideas about this story. We want to reveal some, surprising historical stuff, maybe challenge a few misconceptions,
Right.
and also highlight the very human side of it all, even amidst what seems purely miraculous.
It's amazing how much can be hidden in plain sight in familiar narratives.
Totally. Okay, let's unpack this. What's fascinating here is how often a familiar story can hold so many layers we've never seen before.
And that's precisely what this sermon emphasizes. It really focuses on the human reality, the challenges of Jesus' birth. It contrasts that starkly with what it calls a kind of fairy tale version we sometimes get.
Mm-hmm.
And this connects to a bigger theme in the source, which is about finding gratitude even when things feel lacking. Comparing having like 1,000 blessings versus focusing on that one thing that is a little late in coming.
Ah, I see that connection.
Yeah, and the sermon uses this idea to talk about the struggles and the profound gratitude they felt when establishing a new church. It draws parallels between that difficult process and the challenging circumstances around Jesus' birth.
So the great joy Luke mentions.
Exactly. The source suggests it's not some simple, easy happiness. It's more like a deep, profound triumph that emerges from real struggle.
That really changes the perspective from the get-go. So, okay, let's dive into some specifics. That Roman census in Luke 2.1, ordered by Caesar Augustus.
The famous one.
Right. But the source highlights something pretty unusual about it. It apparently required people to register in their ancestral hometown, not where they were currently living.
Yeah, that's key.
So for Joseph, that meant going all the way back to Bethlehem, because he was from the house of David, the royal line, even though he lived in Nazareth.
And it's worth thinking about why that was so unusual. I mean, typically, a census for tax purposes, you'd count people where they actually lived and worked.
Okay.
Makes sense, right?
Yeah, much simpler.
So this method, it raises questions. The source floats this idea, this theory, that maybe it wasn't just about taxes.
Oh.
Maybe it was also a way for Rome to, identify potential troublemakers,
Yep.
people resisting Roman authority. It even references Judas of Galilee, who Acts 5 mentions led a revolt during a census.
Wow. Okay.
So this raises an important question. Why this specific method? It adds a whole layer of political tension, potentially.
Absolutely. And for Joseph, this wasn't just red tape. Here's where it gets really interesting. He's this royal descendant, right? House of David. But he's likely left Bethlehem, his ancestral home, probably for economic reasons, ends up in Nazareth. And now this Roman decree forces him back to a place tied to his lineage, maybe a past he couldn't sustain.
Yeah, it's a heavy burden. Not just a journey on the road, but a journey back into his own history, his family's standing, or lack thereof.
And then there's Mary. Her situation makes it all even more intense. She's pregnant, very pregnant, due any day.
Right.
And she has to make this journey from Galilee down to Judea, Nazareth to Bethlehem. The source estimates, at least a week? Maybe 2 if they took a safer, longer route.
A grueling trip under normal circumstances, let alone hers.
And let's not forget, she was betrothed,
Yeah.
not officially married yet in the full sense.
Which carried enormous weight in that culture. The source points out the severe consequences for an unmarried pregnant woman. It wasn't just frowned upon.
Yeah.
There's a real danger of honor killing, stoning even.
Yeah.
That was a custom then, a way families felt they had to deal with perceived shame. Sounds brutal to us, but it was a real threat.
That's terrifying.
Absolutely. So Joseph's decision to take Mary with him, the source sees it as, profound. Not just about the census. It was likely to protect her.
Protect her from what might happen back in Nazareth.
Exactly. From the stigma, the judgment, maybe even violence. And also, crucially, to register the child as his own. To publicly claim him, despite the circumstances of his conception.
So what does this all mean for their journey? It paints such a different picture. It does. The source suggests, a silent, maybe fearful, heavy trip. It's a world away from the sort of cheerful Christmas card images we sometimes have.
Like stark contrast, yeah.
Yeah.
It really grounds the great joy in a much tougher reality.
Okay, let's unpack this common misconception. Probably the biggest one, that Jesus was born in a stable because the inn was full.
Right, everyone knows that part.
But the source challenges this directly. First, detail. The word often translated as in Luke 2.7. In the original language, it's kataluma.
Hmm.
And here's the kicker. It's the exact same word Luke uses later in Luke 22 for the guest room, where Jesus and the disciples had the Last Supper.
That's a crucial point. So it suggests not necessarily a commercial inn, like a motel.
Right. But more like a large guest room in a private house, maybe a communal space where travelers or extended family would stay.
Precisely. And the source clarifies the issue wasn't likely that all possible lodging was full. It was that this type of space, a crowded, shared guest room,
It'd be totally unsuitable for giving birth.
exactly, zero privacy, highly impractical, maybe even impossible. You wouldn't deliver a baby in the middle of a room full of other travelers or relatives.
That makes so much more sense. Okay, second detail. The stable. The source questions the image of horses.
Yeah, in ancient Israel, horses were mostly military animals, not for common folk.
Donkeys were the everyday work animals, right? Transport, farming.
Right, so if there was a manger involved, it was almost certainly a donkey's manger, not one for horses.
And the third point, maybe the most direct one, from Luke 2.7 itself. It says Jesus was wrapped in cloths and laid in a manger.
Laid there, yeah, not born there.
It doesn't explicitly say the birth happened in the spot with the manger. And then Matthew's account, Matthew 2.11, says the wise men later found Jesus in a house.
A house. So putting it together, the source suggests a likely scenario based on typical homes back then.
Okay, what did they look like?
Often you might have a two-level structure. Maybe the main living area or that guest room, the kataluma, was on an upper floor. The ground floor could be living space too, but might also incorporate an area for animals, like the family donkey, especially at night or in bad weather.
Ah, okay. Animals kept close by.
Yeah, very common. So the logical conclusion, or at least a very plausible one, is that Mary probably gave birth within the family's living quarters, maybe downstairs, maybe just a more private part of the house. And then, perhaps because the main guest room was crowded, or maybe the manger area downstairs offered a convenient, somewhat sheltered spot.
They laid the newborn Jesus in the manger there.
That seems much more likely based on the text and the context. It fits the pieces together without assuming a separate, detached, stable building.
What's fascinating here is how these details paint a far more realistic, grounded picture of the event. Less fairy tale, more real life.
Exactly. It removes some of the romanticized layers.
Which brings us right back to the source's main point, doesn't it? That Jesus' arrival wasn't this perfect, pristine event. It was, and I'm quoting the feeling here, rooted in the poverty of their reality, the coldness of their hometown, the indifferent gaze of the world, tears, and fear.
Powerful words. And it means that great joy, Luke talks about, isn't diminished by this reality. It's actually magnified. It's a joy that breaks through despite the hardship.
A triumph within the struggle.
Yes, a triumph found right in the middle of a difficult, messy reality. And the source draws that parallel again to the founding of the Giorgiamata Church. It highlights the people involved.
Like Mary and Joseph.
Like Mary and Joseph, showing faith and just pressing on. Like the shepherds who heard the news and just rushed to see to be part of it. It emphasizes the human element, the community, the faith needed to bring something significant into being, even when circumstances are tough.
So what does this all mean for us, the listener, today?
Well, the source really pushes this idea of appreciating what you do have. Remember the 1,000 blessings versus the one thing.
Right. Don't let the one missing piece overshadow everything else.
Exactly. Find gratitude in the present, even with its imperfections and challenges.
We've really peeled back some layers today, haven't we? Moved from maybe a simpler, idealized picture to something much more historically textured and, well, human.
Definitely. It grounds the extraordinary in the ordinary, in a way.
It's been a real journey into the context behind the familiar words.
And maybe here's something to think about as we wrap up, drawing from that core message. When you see the story through this lens, the historical pressures, the societal risks, the sheer human struggle, does understanding that raw reality change how you perceive its ultimate significance?
That's a deep question.
And maybe ask yourself, how often do we let our own one thing, the thing we feel we're lacking or that's delayed, overshadow the 1,000 blessings already present in our lives?
Yeah.
It really compels us to consider that perspective.